a band. Did you hear it?
It is necessary for the recording of sound to convert the sound waves to corresponding changes in light. The sound waves produced by my voice are transmitted through the air to the microphone, where these sound waves are converted to changes in an electric current. These variations in the electric current are then amplified and used to control the light. This varying beam of light falling on the photoelectric cell produces variations in the electric current, which are directly proportional to the variations in the light beam. The sound tract. As the varying electrical current in the photoelectric cell is small, a vacuum tube amplifier is required to increase it to the point where it will operate a loudspeaker. Sound tract.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Occult Rejects. Tonight I have well, now is a fellow podcaster, but it used to be a listener, somebody that had I know that listens to the shows that I have, and is also a artist and a comic book drawer, whatever artist. I don't know what you guys are. I got Paranoid American on with me tonight, and I got Lee, the man himself from Inner Guardians. Thank you for jumping on a short notice and joining in on the show with me. I appreciate it, Lee.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Thanks for the invite.
Of course.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Lee. I'm looking forward to this.
Of course, my man.
Yeah.
No, thank you. And Thomas, would you like to let everybody know where they can find your work?
Yeah, definitely. So the easiest one is paranoidamerican.com, and you can find a whole bunch of cool comics and artwork and all kinds of stuff on there. The one that I'm holding up right here is the MK Ultra pamphlet that breaks down the entire history of MK Ultra from paperclip to the church committee to modern day. And this one you can find at mkultra.comic as well. It'll just bring you right there, mkultracomic.com. And I've been co-hosting with the Reality Czars, so you can check out the Reality Czars podcast. And if you go to my Instagram and my YouTube at Paranoid American, while I still got some spicy memes up there, I'm sure it's going to be taken down again. But yeah, check my Instagram out if you want to see some cool stuff. And I got a whole stack of books behind me. I'm not going to go through every single one, but just for example of the range, I've got comics, I've got pamphlets, and I've even got a children's book on chemtrails here called Connect the Dots, The Confounding Conspiracy of Chemtrails. It's over 50 pages, full color. It's like, it's done well, man. It breaks down all the different aspects of chemtrails. It shows you like the names, dates, places, facts. So if any of that stuff, you're not going to find anyone else making anything close to the stuff that we've got. So yeah, check me out.
Nice. And you want to plug the podcast that you have just recently joined as well?
Yeah, so Reality Czars with Nate and Tony, and then I also do the Occult Book Club with Juan Ayala from the One on One podcast.
Oh,
so
nice.
That's occultbookclub.com. Will bring you right to a playlist on YouTube of a whole bunch of different videos. I think we're almost on like episode 15 or something, which is like 40 hours worth of content.
Wow, good for you. That's what's up. And I think I also got you and the Reality Czars. I got you guys coming back on, like not too long from now, a couple of days, maybe a week, right? Coming back.
Yeah,
on?
you be careful, man, because I'll just grill you back, right? 4x. that's the formula. 4x or 10x, depending on what you believe.
Nice. Yeah. So definitely go check their stuff out. And just a heads up, I do have him and Reality Czars coming back on. I think on the 14th. I got them coming on, and we'll probably go live if they don't mind. They happen to do a ghost hunting type thing at Masonic Lodge, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
But
so
that was Nate. I didn't get to go to that one because I'm in Florida, and Nate's on the other side of the country.
Nice. So I'm looking forward to that.
Back.
Actually, Lee, if you're available, you're more than welcome to jump on. It's going to be a late one too at 10 o'clock. So.
Yeah.
I as soon as I said the ghost hunting, I was like, oh, he may be interested too. And all right, so yeah, I'll put the link in for Reality Czars. Go check that out as well. And now we'll get to Lee, just in case people are watching for the first time or have not heard this man before, let everybody know who you are.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can follow up on that introduction that Thomas just gave, so
right.
I'll try my best. I've got a website, so it's innerguardians.com. I've got no pamphlets, books, or business cards or anything like that. But if anybody wants to contact me, the best way to do it is via the website. I've also got a YouTube channel, Inner Guardians, so you can check that out. I've got quite a few videos, and I've done. How many videos have I done with NY and Occult Rejects now?
Yeah, I was
just 4 or 5.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that this is the first time you've ever seen Lee. He's been on the Occult Rejects of my show, like at least 3-4 times by now. So
yeah,
I think at least probably 4 because you did like a two-part series on Gurdjieff.
Sure.
And then I think I had you on like 2 other times. So
yeah, so if you want to find out more about me, it's probably a good idea to watch the videos we did, the 2-part on Mr. Gurdjieff.
Yeah,
so that's probably good.
That was a slamming series. Thank you very much, sir. Yes, and I do have his link in the bottom as well. I don't have the website. I forgot about that. I did it real quick after we jumped on here. But I do have your YouTube in the bottom. So hit that link and go and subscribe and check out his stuff. I guess we'll get into it. I did want to ask you, because I saw you pull it up before. Did you do that one thing based off of like those old track books?
Oh, chick tracts, yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, it was like those old religious Jesus books, you know?
Yeah, no, I've got a whole bunch of them, and that's actually what it was inspired by. Because when I joined the military in 2000, and the first time I got out of boot camp and got to my first base, I started finding them all over the place. They were on payphones, and they were in like just random cigarette machines in like a bar off base. And I had never seen one before because I guess I just wasn't in the same area. I grew up in sort of like a Roman Catholic area, and there was a lot of like Greek Orthodox. But once I got out into the middle of Texas, you know what I mean, there was Baptist and Protestant and Pentecostal, and I guess some wacko was just like loading up the bases, and I love them for it because I found the first one I found was called like Bad Billy Bob or Bad Billy or something. It was just about a biker that was inherently worshiping the devil just because he was a biker. And there was another one where like if you went trick-or-treating, right, then you were serving the devil. And I ate them up, man. I thought it was funny. I thought it was ironic. You know, it's not like I wanted to make something like that, but it burrowed itself deep into my brain so that decades later I was like, hey, I want to make one of those things, but instead of being about religion, I want it to be about conspiracy theories. And that's where that little pamphlet came from.
You know what's funny? And, you know, we were talking about, like, maybe artwork before, like, if it could be sigils or, you know, whatever, stuff like that. The real interesting thing is, like, I remember those books, and I remember them from, like, before I went to school. That's how young I was. I remember specifically seeing those little track books at, like, my grandparents' house. And those things are still burned into my head from that long ago.
Blow your mind with something. This is going to blow your mind, I think. It blows my mind because I'm so deep into comic books. But so Jack Chick never really gets credit as being a comic artist, even though clearly, I mean, I don't have one next to me, but this artwork represents very close to what you'd find in like a Jack Chick comic, a Chick track. But if you were to show someone these panels out of context, didn't tell them what it was about, didn't say it was, you know, had like Bible thumping at the end, you just laid them all out and said, is this a comic? You know, is this a comic book? It feels like everyone would say, yeah, it's a comic book. You've got illustrations, you got panel descriptions, you got dialogue. It fits every requirement you could possibly have to be a comic book. But the second they find out it's Jack T. Chick and it's just like fundamentalist Christian information, then he kind of like, you sidestep them. So like the comic industry as a whole doesn't even recognize Jack Chick, you know, now deceased, as a comic book author, because if they did, he would be the most prolific, you know, comic retailer on the face of the planet by like orders of magnitude, because he didn't print these comics in order to make large amounts of profit. He printed them to just give them out in bulks because it was kind of like part of his evangelism, right? So there was, you know, like God was funneling the money through him, or so he thought. So by that factor alone, though, that metric makes Chick Tracts, as weird and obscure as they are, probably the most popular comic book in all time, across the planet.
And it's burnt into my brain. Like I was saying before, like with the magic, is that magic? That shit stuck in my head for that long? Or was it?
I wonder if he'd be offended. Would Jack Chick be offended if you called his artwork a sigil?
I also
get mad about that.
Tell you the truth, I even remember them honestly because they just actually seemed like evil. Like them pointing out the evil to me actually just seemed weird. Like I don't know, it was just very like to me. Even though they're trying to bring you close,
very bad ones.
They were trying to like bring you to God, but I
ones.
just felt it was very like demonic in itself. I don't know how to explain it. It was just very weird. I remember it giving me the creeps as a kid.
There's a few that they never re-released. One of them in particular was about like a dad that was abusing his kids, and at the very end, he just kind of says sorry and cries on the shoulder of a priest. And the priest is like, all right, you're good now, and sends it back home. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, you just sent this abuser back home. And that was sort of the lesson in every single Chick track. It was just like at the very end, if you pray to Jesus and cry on a priest's shoulder, then basically, clean slate, which is it's an interesting message, but some of the times they delivered it, it was in really horrible ways.
I think what also kind of got me, and then after this we'll go back to you, but I even think about it, it was probably some of like the first artwork that I think I remember seeing that equated to like, this is the face of something bad. Like instead of just hearing it or being told it, like now I actually had something like an image of what it was. And now I'm like thinking, I mean, just like Corona or the terrorists. Now there's this invisible person that I have this idea of what it looks like that's going to get me unless I'm a good boy. You know what I'm saying?
It's that visual anchor.
Yeah, exactly. It was a visual anchor. It just made it so much more real now to me as a kid.
Well, there's a lot of stuff coming out now. I don't know if you've seen it. And I don't know what it's like with American TV, but in the UK, there's people that are putting out clips of old television shows and all of the sort of sexual innuendos, and it's so blatantly obvious now. But back then, it was kind of naive. So there must be,
sure.
Maybe Thomas, you can expand on this, like the power of sigil magic and the introduction or the initiation with children's entertainment.
Well, on that exact topic, actually, another fun fact is that I worked at Disney in the animation building on the back lot here in Orlando for about 10 years. So I didn't get to work on any huge blockbuster movies that you would have seen. I just worked on a lot of stuff around the park and ancillary stuff. But man, like, the lore and the stories and the interest that I had in Disney, not just growing up in Florida, but then working there later on, there's all like you've got like the Aladdin line where it's like all teenagers take off your clothes. You've got the word sex that shows up in multiple places. One example is in like the Lion King, and they jump on a pile of like feathers or dust and it spells the word out in the background. And there's so many, not just like, subtle, nuanced like wordplay, but like physical things. Like what was the original Little Mermaid VHS clamshell cover that had little dicks that they had to take out and not re-release? So it's funny because there's a lot of just disgruntled employees and people that they're artistic and they want to continue feeling artistic, and part of being artistic is kind of like bucking the trend and not working for the man and corporate media. But then at the same time, you're in this paradox where it's like, I'm a creative artist that's got all of these revolutionary ideas, but I'm working for one of the biggest global conglomerates known to man that's going to like outlast me and my grandchildren, right? So I think there's a little bit of that, of people wanting to kind of like poison the pot a little bit, and just kind of like stick one to dad here and there, like keying your own dad's car in a way. But then I also think that there's a way, I don't want to offend too many people, but I really care because I've been saying my whole life, but once you reach a certain age and you don't have kids and you're still obsessed with Disney, there's just like something strange going on. And I'm not gonna make an accusation, but I'm just saying that like there's something that you need to move on from. And I think that kind of dynamic attracts a certain type of person to work in that sort of environment. So I mean, all that sexual innuendo and sexual charge, it's almost like, like a priest that's always around altar children all the time. Like there's something not right about it, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. Was it Disney that came up with the term Imagineering?
Yeah, that was their engineering department. That was like where I wanted to aspire to work for, but it was very political, and you had to enter the company in a completely different way than I did. You probably had to have like an engineering degree, but the Imagineering is also kind of like your branch into designing roller coasters and like all of like the really cool rides that could kill people if you didn't know what you were doing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. There was something. Oh, I can't remember if it was Beauty of the Beast. Like it was, you're talking about like stuff that isn't blatant. I even remember as a kid when, I mean, I guess I was probably in my teens. I don't remember when it came out, but I think it might have been Beauty and the Beast. I could be wrong. But I even remember like in a Disney cartoon, like I even picked it up and I just thought it was weird. And it's not like I was being a prude about it. I was just like, that's weird that's in a kid's cartoon. Because like I'm in my teens and I'm still associating this with like, this is what my cousin at 10 years old should be watching. Not me anymore. And, because I'm getting older. And there was like a point where they were like singing and doing whatever they do. And like there was 3 chicks singing and they were like in these like, dresses, that has their cleavage or whatever. And like they all went to go lean down on something and to like sing together. And as like they all leaned down, it's like all their tits like came up. And I was just like, did you actually need to incorporate that into the, even then I was just like, is that like a little too much?
From the movie standpoint, probably not. But from the sanity of the animators that were just drawing the same things over and over for, 100 days in a row. Because a lot of these guys, too, if you think about it, when they weren't working for Disney and doing children's cartoons, it's not like, when the Disney movie was done, there was all this other children's artwork that had to be done. A lot of that stuff in the 40s, 50s, 60s, a lot of pinup models, a lot of like sort of a storefront artwork and things like that. But those things didn't live under the same sort of laws or expectations that you would for children's cartoons. So I think that a lot of those adult topics made their way into children's cartoons because it was all adults making it. And it wasn't like, they weren't really like the progressive sort of meek, adults that you might imagine working now that are like afraid of shaking too many feathers. If anything, the workers at that time might have like temper Walt. Walt was probably trying to take things even crazier than they probably should have. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stories about how sort of like, totalitarian that dude was.
Mm. Yeah, I was just thinking again about Disney and, even before how you said that, like, even in the 80s, it was like when you look back at some of the older stuff, it's very blatant now to you. I even think going back and looking at some of like Disney's older stuff, The Dark Cauldron. I mean, if you were to go back and look at that now, you'd be like, damn, that's actually pretty like blatant. So like
and that one destroyed the relationship between Don Bluth and Disney, and that's when I think he took a whole bunch of people with him out of the company, all the young bucks. They left them and left all the legacy dinosaurs at Disney when he did that.
And then you have Don Bluth with The Secret of Nim.
Mm.
Very occult too, and that's old as shit. Like when thinking about it, like there was, I do think Disney, Don Bluth, and like maybe a few other people, I think there was kind of a lot of occultism being inserted into cartoons and stuff like that.
Oh, big. And so, man, another podcast I didn't mention that I do, one called the Occult Disney podcast with one of my friends, Matt, in Japan. And we've been watching every single classic Disney movie. I think we're almost through the 70s at this point. But another movie, and I want to say some of the earliest movies that used to be my favorite, it's almost ruined every single one of them for me, like looking into the background and the history. But like one of the examples was Sword in the Stone. Probably, I used to think it was like my favorite OG Disney movie, ever. And it kind of is a little bit, but it's got supplanted by some other ones. But one of the really weird and creepy parts of that book is that it was written by a guy that was lusting after like a small boy, and he never could come to terms with it, and it kind of like destroyed him. He just kind of lived in depression through it. And if you look at the story, not just in the actual book, but in the Disney portrayal of it, it's about this old dude that lives in the woods by himself, a total hermit and a recluse, and he tries to steal someone else's kid, right? He tries to steal this orphan and raise him as his own. And he wants to be this paternal figure without having to actually have a kid and without having to like have a family. He just wants to go out and snatch someone and like show him how to live with this old man. It's if you actually look into the history of like who wrote it, who produced it, It's just so weird because it lines up with like the creepier aspects of the background and not like the fun aspects of it. So I think there's just a lot of this that goes deep with a lot of like the original Disney properties.
Wasn't there even something around that movie too where it got, I think like it did bad, and then I think like they changed the name possibly, and they didn't like re-release it for like the longest time out of all, like almost all of their movies. You know, Disney pumps out their old shit all the time just to get people to buy it again. But for that some reason, I think that movie, it took them like over 25, 30 years to finally put it back out again. They kept it in
the vault for longer than other ones, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Did you ever see, you know, another one, Watership Down? Did you ever see that?
Oh, with the rabbits. I don't think that was Disney though.
No. But that's like another old cartoon that, to me, I mean, I even think some of the really, it was not children. For the topics and what was really going on, it was like kind of like grown-up shit, really, in my opinion. Have you ever seen that, Thomas, or no? Watership Down?
Yeah. No, I was waiting to see if Lee had anything to say. I don't want to keep stumbling over them, but yeah, dude, okay. Watership Down. I remember when a teacher showed us that in middle school, I think it was. And I'm convinced that teachers show that to kids just to see the reactions of kids that have never seen a cartoon get violent. You know what I mean? Beyond Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
I remember seeing that shit on TV as a kid, and I was like, yo. What the fuck? That was another one.
Did the iGoat. Was that Disney?
Because
that was quite
no, it definitely wasn't Disney. You mean Pet Goat? Pet Goat 2 or whatever?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I just saw maybe a 3 or 4 minute scene from it where they're traveling in the boat. It's kind of dark. I don't know if you remember that bit.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think that was I mean, it might have been a Disney animator. I doubt it.
I don't remember the guy's name, and I mean, this is almost 2 years ago, but that was actually one of the first things the Occult Rejects actually covered, I think. Was iPet Goat. We did a couple of part series. It wasn't. I don't think the guy was associated with Disney at all, but they do. I think we did mention who the artist was.
I'll say one thing is that the guy, and I think he did like 3 or 4 interviews the year that it came out. He was on InfoWars and he was on a couple other ones. But the quality of that animation, it was definitely not someone that just downloaded a pirated version of, you know, Cinema 4D and put it together in their free time. Like that was done by like masterfully by a team of really talented animators. So I wouldn't be shocked if there was someone that has contracted for Disney at some point in the past that also, you know, worked on that movie. I mean, I worked for Disney, right? I did animation for Disney, and now I'm making funny memes and stuff too. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility here.
That's true. Very good point. I guess I did want to ask a question, and this is actually for both of you. Just your opinions on this, and it's rather, I guess, could be multiple reasons why. We were talking about, I guess, occultism and like children's movies and stuff, and, you know, children's cartoons. What do you think is the reason behind that, or or why that happens? Could it be trying to insert it because of its magical properties? They're just trying to put it in front of your face so that maybe you remember it later on. Well, I guess that would be magic too, but or like you were saying, is it because like maybe they're trying to push the button and actually expose it? Like, what do you think is the reason for a lot of that stuff? And I guess maybe we'll start with you, Thomas, and then we'll go to Lee.
Okay. I mean, I've got mixed feelings on it, but one of my main thoughts is that we're talking about archetypes that outlast a human lifetime, right? There's things that, for whatever reason, let's just go with like a platonic solid, for example. These abstract concepts of like a perfect sphere that doesn't exist in reality, or you've got like golden spiral, or you've got pi, or you've got, you know, Fibonacci sequences, like these things that are embedded that are patterns. So just like we were talking about sigils a little bit earlier, I don't necessarily know if someone puts the sigil, or they put like an all-seeing eye, you know, symbolism into everything that they do, if they're trying to like draw power from it, or more like, hey, I know this symbol is going to outlast me and anything that I do. So if I just attach things to it, it kind of acts as like this vehicle. It's almost like parking your car on one of those huge ships that like brings it across, you know, like a big ferry or something, instead of just trying to like drive your car across a bay. You know, it's like you realize that if you align with this bigger force, then maybe that bigger force kind of like, you can work off the momentum of it. And it's the same thing with architecture and, you know, like the founding fathers and everything. Jay-Z being in the Illuminati and throwing up the sign, right? Like all that is taking the energy and the focus that people have already invested in a certain topic or idea, and then just saying like, hey, we're gonna dip into that. It's almost like a take a penny, leave a penny bowl in a way. So it's like, we're gonna come out with this Disney movie. You know, here's this really popular motif that's going around, or that might starting to be trending. Let's just tap into that and let's include it in here so that it feels like, you know, we're part of something bigger. Like this movie or this animation or this comic book is just part of this like much bigger momentum of like where the world's going, as opposed to like, oh, I'm just going to put this, you know, this shape here because that shape is going to make you pay attention. I don't think it's like that. I think it's like you're paying attention to the shape, and now that shape is in the cartoon. So now you kind of transfer some of your interest and like your inherent knowledge about that shape, and you start applying it to the cartoon in sort of like a marketing gimmick kind of way. You know, it's like getting someone all jazzed up in like a cartoon or in like a commercial, and then having that big crescendo, and then they throw the logo at you, like get that anchor in there with the sound and the vision and everything, and then take it away slowly. It's kind of the same thing. It's just like, you know, utilizing these things that already work as multipliers.
That's funny. You said a few things that actually I've seen personally. I had a artist on, Fernando. I think it dropped like a week or two ago. And he was like, he does admit that he puts like occultism into his art, and he had even said himself, there's certain things that he knows that is just like, regardless if he even understands like what it even really means, like he'll sometimes put columns in his shit. Or the floors, like the checkered floors, because he knows that that's, for some reason, when it comes to art, that stuff just grabs people's attention. And he even says himself, there is just certain occult geometry that he thinks is just going to grab your attention anyway.
Because so like occultism invented that geometry, they found it, and then they were like, oh, what a nice little trick, we're going to keep this to ourselves, hence it being occulted.
Yeah. And then the other thing I was thinking about at the end that you were talking about, I think, I could be wrong, but I even think like Teresa, my other co-host that I have on sometimes, there's, I think, cartoons that her kids watched, and that she's told me recently that she's noticed like occult symbolism in it now. And because of that, she pays attention to it more, I think.
Oh, yeah?
So like what you were saying before, because of seeing it, now you're like, oh, well, I know what that means. And now all of a sudden you caught yourself, you're paying attention to it now. Because now you're trying to see how is that inserted into the story. Like now you might be looking at it differently.
You can watch it twice, you know.
So I can see how those two things have actually happened in real life, you know, or I've had another artist tell me that they do that too. So I find that interesting. And thank you, Thomas. Now, Lee, what do you think?
Well, I think we're talking about like archetypes and fundamentals regarding this, and ultimately, in the end, you could say it's to do with the harvesting of energy or attention as energy. So there's, I mean, it's just this one aspect alone is a massive subject. We can go right into energy reciprocation in retrospect. So as an example, when somebody appreciates or their attention is grabbed by somebody's work of art, it doesn't matter if it's today, tomorrow, in 100 years, 1,000 years, that energy will go back to the artist, or it can do if it's done with that intention in mind. So even if you look at the sort of priceless paintings or the classics like Rembrandt, so if you go to a museum, or sorry, a gallery, and you observe a self-portrait, and you stand there and give your attention and admiration and appreciation, that energy ultimately will be channeled back to Rembrandt in retrospect on the morning or the day that he painted the painting. Because when you look at time in terms of linear, that's one thing, but when you look at it in terms of it being cyclical, it brings a whole new dimension to occultism.
I
think there's a lot of that going on.
I was gonna say, I wonder if that plays into like that archetype of the crazy artist that's just like, you know, that dies penniless and crazy, and, you know, has like no respect until hundreds of years later. I wonder if as they're painting, you know, as Van Gogh's like chopping off his ear and finishing those paintings, he's like, no one understands me, but like I already got fans. Like he already knew that he had fans hundreds of years in the future, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think there is something, and it could even play into the reincarnation process. So it could actually, the money that they didn't have in their original life when they made the art, they're going to get in the future. It's like an investment.
I have often thought that about, that's why, like, you know, just so many people like pop stars and just all that stuff. Like, it's almost like you trying to like prepare yourself to be like a god when you come back. Like, are you just trying to suck up everybody's like energy so then you come back as like the great I am? You know, like you like what you're saying. Literally, it's like an energy transfer for them to take with them to come back. Maybe it's weird. And what you know when you said that before about the energy transfer in the art, the first thing I thought about was Lon Milo Duquette, actually, because he even admits to doing shit to his tarot cards before he put them out to sell. And I was like, huh. I never thought of it being an energy transfer. Like,
yeah, when somebody writes a book, they might put a particular sigil on the front cover, and if it's a bestseller, potentially that's an investment in energy of attention, which energy could act as fuel as well. So there's many different ways you can look at this.
Well, the thing is that when I first heard that, I was like, oh, this guy just wanted to sell more fucking tarot decks. But it may not have actually been about, maybe it was more of the energy transfer than the money, actually. It's just, I never really thought of that, interestingly.
I really think the two are the same thing. I think that that money and focus and energy, we're just talking about different things. We're in, you know, if it wasn't fiat currency, then it's almost like the gold that you've got has some kind of inherent energy within it. But even in a fiat system, that energy represents like all, like if you hate your job, right? If you work for 8 hours a day and it's just like nonstop misery, but you're doing it in order to get this physical form of energy that you can hold in your hands in the form of dollars, and then give it to other people to exchange. Like, here's my 8 hours of energy for your 8 hours of energy. So it really is just like, you know, you know, commodity, making it into just like this financial economic system of focus.
You're totally right.
So like, and if I like go and buy an album, right now, it's like that's my focus in a distilled form, you know, almost like calcified. It's like my calcified focus, and I'm going to exchange it to the shopkeep, and then he has to pass it up the chain. It feels the same way that if everything operated like a Phoenician magic system where everything was just sacrifice and like prayers and, you know, like omens to gods and stuff, and you didn't have the fiat currency, it's still talking about the same energy transfer. It's just a little bit messier.
I know.
Well, the thing is, we know this even in the mundane. It's just that we don't always realize it. So we've all heard the term to pay attention. Are you paying attention? No. So you could say attention is a type of currency, and like with all forms of currency, it's not unlimited. So if you can't make energy, then you take it. So the dark occultists, they will operate in terms of taking energy, as opposed to trying to make it or create it. And it's a limited substance as well. So it's like gold, it's like anything, money, it's not unlimited.
Either of you guys familiar with or fans of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars?
No.
So Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, apparently it's the rumor behind it. It came out in Behold the Pale Horse by William Cooper, I believe. It's just like one of the extra chapters because it's sort of like a collection of various things. And one of those chapters, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, apparently was found in like a government auction, and someone bought an old Xerox copy machine, and like when they got the copy machine home, they opened it up and there was a jam, and in the jam was like this pamphlet from who knows, you know. It was almost like a Protocols of Zion type of thing. Like no one knows where it came from, but inside this pamphlet, it breaks down the use of currency, not just financial currency, but almost like a social currency, and how to use it to control people. So one of the things that they kind of mention, and this is almost like in a Jordan Maxwell style, like currency is a currency, like where it's all the same thing. But if you were to lay out the way that the financial system worked as it were electric current, and you look at like a schematic for a microprocessor, some kind of a circuit design, you know that if I add a little resistor here, then energy always follows the path of least resistance, just like water would. So if I just add some resistors in a certain circuit, then I know that automatically the energy will just automatically go away from that particular area. So one of the examples that they give in the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars is that like the police can decide if they want to be like overly aggressive on certain things or less aggressive. So if they want to like squeeze everybody that's doing drugs, then all of a sudden they raise the tension in the area. People are getting less money. They're not getting their fix. Everyone's getting in trouble. So it like rises this chaotic energy, and then they can relax those laws and stop arresting people. And then it's like you can almost see if you were able to like, you know, take a bird's eye view of all this as if you were some kind of circuit designer moving these pieces around, you can see that energy like flow in different operations and in different ways. So I think, man, like that's sort of like a magical use, but in a practical way. Like they're using money and they're using like police enforcement in that example, the same way a magician might use, you know, like regular magic.
Yeah, it's having the knowledge and the know-how how to change the parameters and to channel or funnel energy in different directions, different ways. So a classic example, for instance, if you take London in the UK, the police, they may not go too hard on house intrusion or break-ins, yeah? Now, you'd ask the question, well, why would that happen? Well, think about the insurance industry. The industrial complex of insurance. Insurance is big business in the UK. So if no houses are getting burgled, house insurance isn't compulsory. It's not a mandate. So they wouldn't sell insurance. So which has the greater power, the police or the insurance companies? Probably the insurance companies. The insurance companies will probably be able to have an influence on the policing.
Well, who has more money is another way you could ask that, right?
Yeah. And how have they got more money? By adjusting the parameters of society.
There's another example of that here in Florida in Clearwater. I don't know if it's still the case, but like maybe 1 or 2 decades ago, that Clearwater was a huge center for Scientology. And
that's why I said Clearwater.
At a certain point, it was almost like every cop in Clearwater was moonlighting for the Church of Scientology, to the point where that if a cop saw someone do something wrong, but they knew that they were a Scientologist or affiliated with the Scientologist that were going to be paying them 3 times their salary after hours, then it's like, do you pull that guy over knowing that he's supposed to be cutting your paycheck later that night, and that paycheck's going to be more than your salary is going to be? And the only reason that they would stay police is because if you're not a police, then you don't have the same gravitas of being hired as like a private security, right? So like you got to be the cop in order to get the job, but then that extra moonlighting job turns to be like the main gig. So I think you can extrapolate that same dynamic across all different sort of walks of life.
Yeah, and this will take place in the secret societies a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get into that a little bit, man, because Lee, you mentioned about how many different. See, I lost count by the time you finished listing all the different orders and brotherhoods and societies that you've been in.
Mm-hmm. Well, for myself, it's more the mystery schools and esoteric schools as opposed to.
Okay, see, I interchangeably use it because I'm a little bit crass.
Well, I mean, you could say a lot of the stuff is the same. It's just that you've got the left hand and the right hand path. So you've got 2 ways of using the occulted knowledge. So you could say the right hand path, which would be the esoteric and mystery schools, they would use occulted knowledge for the advancement, for the evolution of humanity. The left hand path would be more inclined to use the techniques for service to self and for the involution of humanity or suppression, so that they always stay on top.
Do you think there's any chance at all that left hand, right hand could be a similar false dichotomy as like right red and blue, or like Democrat Republican?
Yeah, well, there's way more nuance to it. So, for instance, you could even add the third hand to that. It's more of a spectrum, and the reason why I describe it that way is in simplistic terms, but in reality, it's layered and interwoven. So for instance, you'd have far left hand path, far right hand path. Then you might have some right-handers in the left-hand groups and vice versa. So there's a lot of that going on. So all the way up to the top, including Silicon Valley, Google, there's a high percentage of occultists and esoteric groups that have infiltrated all of the computer technology for good and not so good. So I know for a fact that there's lots of occultists and people from esoteric groups that have infiltrated or gone into Silicon Valley for the development, for the, you could say, to save humanity from the evil consequences of technology that is being used in the wrong way. So what does that mean? It means if you look at technology in itself, it doesn't really have any empathy or sympathy or no interest in the advancement of humanity. They will be there to make sure that there's some kind of conscience instilled into technology.
Are these the ones that are censoring ChatGPT? Is that what you're talking about? Like, is this why I can't tell them to make me dirty jokes because it's like that's not appropriate?
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, I can't really say for sure in detail in every single thing, but I do know for a fact that you could call them right-hand pathers or just good people that have that will work even for the pharmaceutical companies. Because if it was left all to the left-handers, then it would be game over already by now. It would have been since probably the days of Babylon.
But I think this is that checkerboard that we were talking about before. Because it's not like you're jumping from the left side of a spectrum to the right side of the spectrum. You're walking across a checkerboard floor where every once in a while your left foot steps completely in the black, and every once in a while your left foot steps completely in the white. You know, at least that's the way that I've always kind of interpreted that checkerboard motif.
Well, ultimately, the objective is to leave the checkerboard and to take the third option, to evoke the third force. That's the ultimate ambition or aim. But at the same time, so as an example, it doesn't matter how kind of mystical or magical or occulted somebody is. Chances are you're going to have to get up and do a day job and be in the world. So it's like being in the world, but not of it, you could say. Or externally, you conforming to X, Y, and Z, but internally, you could be like an inner anarchist to the system. And a lot of esoteric occultists will actually do that.
Oh, so the real dream is to be like a Manly Palmer Hall, where you just latch on to a couple of sugar moms and just collect sweet books and travel the world and just make, talking about so he was kind of like one of the OG conspiracy podcasters or like occult podcasters, right?
He did it with books, right?
Well, I suppose that goes into the realms of grifting. I mean, that, or charlatans. I mean, in the Silver Age, in the days of Steiner and Blavatsky and Gurdjieff Ouspensky, their big problem at that time was charlatans.
Would you put Manly Palmer Hall in the charlatan category?
My personal take on him is that you could spend 100 hours.
He won't hear this. Don't worry. He won't hear this.
From somebody that studied the occult and esoteric knowledge, you could probably spend 100 hours listening, but learn absolutely nothing. It doesn't really ever get to the point about anything. So
I agree with that.
It could be a way of just wasting time, like a lot of these occult groups or esoteric books and so on and so forth. You could invest a lot of attention but get nowhere. Like I call it a cul-de-sac.
I agree with that. Actually, I agree with that more than I thought I would when you started. By the time you ended, I 100% agree. Because I kind of see Manly Palmer Hall as like a Whitman sampler. Like, you're not necessarily going to walk away with like a nutritious full meal, but you'll definitely find out like, oh, I don't like that nasty coconut one, but I really liked that strawberry one. And then like, I'm going to go and find other things like that one that I liked. And, maybe like figure out a taste you didn't realize you had. I kind of see Palmer Hall as like the guy that would get you interested in the thing that was more important than something else that you might have been concerned about.
Yeah, it's kind of like these former CIA agents or operatives that do these documentaries. And you got to think to yourself, like, why are they doing it? Why would they do it? Maybe they've been tasked to just waste your time or take you down a rabbit hole.
Well, it's like listening to the astronauts speak.
Yeah. Well, you know, all these, is it Discovery Channel? They have all these kind of ancient aliens and stuff like that, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, where's it going to get you?
True.
You know, that's what you have to ask whenever you get into anything or study anything. What are the results? Are there any results from it?
I'm a huge advocate in NLP, not necessarily the marketing version of NLP where like you pay to get turned into like a teacher or anything like that, but using something like reframing where you can find yourself in a completely, like dumb situation that has no immediate benefit and turn it into a learning experience by just reframing it. Like I'm going to translate every like third word that this person's saying into reframing it, or just like random stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's like watching the mainstream media. Sometimes I don't own a television. I threw it out the window maybe 20 years ago, but I will sometimes watch the mainstream media for that exact reason. You can actually learn quite a lot if you know how to listen to it. If you have to
picking out the patterns, right?
Yeah, if you learn how to de-occult what they're trying to say. In actual fact, pretty much everything that the mainstream media says or is saying, from like energy crisis, from climate and atmospheric changes, you can actually translate that to the inner terrain, the inner world, directly. Pretty much everything that they explain or point to this realm or this world as a problem, you can actually redirect it and reframe it into what's taking place inside. And you can learn a lot as long as you know how to translate it or to de-occult it or decode it.
Very well said. Something I did want to ask you, Thomas, not to get off the topic, but something I did want to ask you, just regardless coming on. What was it, I guess, I don't know so much maybe about like what got you into art, but what got you into like covering occultism and using occultism in your art and doing the conspiracy? Like, did that come with you doing with that? Like, did it all happen at the same time, or was it something that you got into as you got older?
I've always been into occultism and conspiracy theories, and the thing that really sealed the deal was that I joined the military, like I said, in 2000. And or like I basically joined as like in a high school at the end of 2000. So in 2001, I get drafted, I actually entered service, and 9/11 happens. My first or second week, I'm out doing like drills, I'm marching around and everything, and they come in and they give everyone flashlights and safety vests, and we're all standing outside holding up like flashlights, and it was the most ridiculous thing. And we find out like 2 weeks later that 9/11 had happened, like the planes had hit the Twin Towers or the holograms or whatever you want to believe. But like that huge international trauma everyone went through, well, I didn't go through it, and neither did the small little clique of people in my flight that I was in. So like me and 59 other people, we didn't experience that huge national trauma. It would be like, if like 60 people just left the country when JFK got shot and came back, they're like, hey, how's JFK doing? And it's like, oh, you didn't hear? So I remember that coming out of that, I was like, I can't believe that something so major that had maybe affected me in the military more directly than anyone outside the military, that this thing had happened. But it was like, oh, we don't want to, have the trainees lose focus on their training. But in part of that, I also felt like I missed out on some important programming that was supposed to happen, because I got out and everyone apparently was like loving each other and waving American flags, but it was like the same country that I had just, left earlier when I joined boot camp and then came back out into it. I missed that whole section. And I think for that reason, I just felt so detached when anyone was talking about it. Like I had friends and family that were directly affected, but it felt like something that didn't actually happen. It felt like so surreal to me. And as soon as I started getting to that mentality, everywhere I was looking, like again in the military, I was just like, oh, that's mind control. Like I was seeing TIs dress down kids and watch them until they would just, shake and shudder and turn into a ball of jelly. And there was one in particular, as they came in on one of the first nights, and they're yelling at people. 3 different huge TI, these jacked like Captain America looking dudes, corner this tiny little frail 17-year-old that has like an I Love New York shirt on. He was probably 70 pounds dripping wet, right? So these 3 dudes are yelling at him like, very intimidating, I'd imagine. And one of them's telling, take your clothes off, go to bed. One of them's telling him, go take a shower. And the other one's just screaming at him, just like, rah, 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 do something, do something. So the guy freaks out and he just like walks into the shower with all of his clothes on. And I see the 3 TIs laughing about it. And I remember thinking like, oh, like they're just breaking us down. This is just like programming. But it's not like I had known about MK Ultra and like all different, like I've maybe seen Jacob Slatter, but I didn't know what it was about. You know what I mean? But I think just in that moment, I kind of like saw what was happening. Like, oh, they're breaking people down into a more primal state so that they'll just freak out. So either A, see if anyone can handle it and if they break down, but also there's something about losing that control to now all of a sudden you'll just do whatever someone tells you. And years later, as I learned more about like NLP and I looked into like the MK Ultra, it's that same concept of, if you either give someone too many things to worry about, like 7 or more things, I think, to keep in your active memory and like in your conscious memory, then you can start slipping in other stuff that it just bypasses it. It's almost like hacking it. But you can also just traumatize someone and put them in such a state where they never know what's going to happen next. And if you can get someone to just abandon all hope that logic is still persisting in their world, you just have to be that one hand that grabs out and says, here's a stable hand, grab onto this. It's familiar. And I think that's what people will do. So I see all this happening, and I'm 18 years old, 17, 18. So I missed out on 9/11. I'm seeing like mind controlling happen right in front of me. So by the time I got out of that, like I just jumped headfirst into the Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson. Like all of the old conspiracy movies. Like I rewatched JFK a bunch of times. I just got like really deep into it. So yeah, long answer to like I've been lifelong diehard conspiracy theorist since I can remember.
I think that's great that even just your experience, in the service, you were like, holy shit, like you even saw it there.
And when I was joining, I would ask people, why are you joining? Because I knew why I was joining. I was joining because I got lied to. I didn't know it at the time, but they told me I was gonna get like a degree and I was gonna get like all these awesome, like life advantages. None of it ended up being true. But I went through because I was trying to get like degrees and stuff. It was almost like free college in a way. But there was other people I'd be like, hey, so why did you join? And I remember at MEPS, one of the guys told me, oh, this is the only job, he was a Marine, only job that I can get where I can kill people legally and get paid for it. And he was being serious. He wasn't joking because he just wanted to join infantry Marines. He didn't even have like a career field he wanted to go in, just infantry. So, and then like my bunkmate in my first deployment, he was telling me how he got to go to Guantanamo and they just let you break fingers there. And he was like excited about it. So I just remember thinking like, man, I'm living in a different world of some of these people. Cause I don't know. I felt like maybe because I didn't get the programming, because, I didn't break down in boot camp, or like I missed out on something I was supposed to have gotten where I'd be like, hell yeah, I get to break fingers. You know what I mean? Like I didn't get that part. So I don't know. I never meshed with it. So I left.
I know what you mean though. It's like you didn't fall into like the whole camaraderie thing about it, like I know what you're getting at for sure. That's funny. That's good though. I'm glad you it's a good experience, so you can at least look back and like be like, I know because I was there and saw it. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a little bit of a difference when you go through the experience instead of like just assuming that's what's going on.
It's hard to describe the level of it, but it was like I went in with all of the funny conspiracy movies and pop culture references, but like, oh, haha, real funny. And then after it's like, oh no, that has to be real. Like some of that stuff has to be real because of the amount of corruption and incompetence and just people that are like want to do bad things to people. That was one of my takeaways is that in boot camp, they told us very explicitly, like, this is the Air Force. The Air Force has 2 purposes of existing: kill people and break their things. Like those are our mission statements. And it was completely different, of course, than all of the commercials and magazine advertisements I'd seen where it's aim high and like all of this other camaraderie and and career building stuff. It was like, no, now that you're here and we've locked the door and you can't go home, you know, you've signed your life over, you're here to kill things and you know, kill people and break things.
Aim high and blow that fucking head off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something I did want to ask you also, like, you know, I know you're into like the occultism and adding that into your stuff or even covering it, like kind of like, you know, making that like the main objective. Well, like, what was it that got you, I guess, into doing that, or like why? You know what I'm saying? Like, and like maybe give some examples of like stuff that you've even done that is kind of like focusing heavily on like occult symbolism or occult ideas. You know?
Yeah, I mean, one of them would be in my Time Sampler series. I did a whole issue on, I mean, it goes through a whole story arc that starts with the Federal Reserve and it ends back at the Federal Reserve after 5 years. But even within the Federal Reserve, that opening place, which takes place in Jekyll Island, this is based on some reports that Alexander Graham Bell had stayed there, and Alexander Graham Bell heavily believed in spiritualism, and he thought that it was actual spirits that were traversing through these wires that were, you know, if I talked to you, it wasn't necessarily my voice that you were hearing, it was like a spirit hearing my voice and then traveling through the wire and then like saying my voice to you in a way. I'm oversimplifying that, but just knowing that all of these early founders were deep into occultism themselves, it was again like, what am I miss out on? What lesson did I not get told that all of this has something to it? So on one of those, I just try to break down, and it leads into a direct example of Skull and Bones. So Skull and Bones, instead of just throwing like a 322 and the skull and then just moving on, I really wanted to understand like what the occult symbolism meant. Like, why do they get into the coffins? You know, like, why is it about Skull and Bones specifically? So doing like deep dives and reading like Anthony Sutton's books and pretty much anything I could get for Trine Day publications, and just getting all deep into it, and then trying to reveal as much as that I could visually through the comic medium. Because again, the comic medium, since it's so visual, I think the main benefit is being able to show things way above and beyond that we even do in like CGI. So if there was something that would take you $1 million to hire a whole CGI team to put together like a cool visual, I try to make that into like a comic book page, because I don't, you know, I pay the same amount per page versus having to hire a whole team. So it's up to me to make something cool. So like, for example, in Time Samplers, they have psychedelic time travel. And that's how they get in between different places. So in the very first one where they do the psychedelic time travel, it's got a symbol of every single different conspiracy that the rest of the series goes into. So you've got like the Byzantine double-headed eagle that kind of represents not just Masonry and Scottish Rite, but that the original concept of Byzantine and having two heads on the bird. And it gets into just like so many different aspects. And the reason that I like putting those little symbols in there is that they're like callbacks. They're like little Easter eggs. It's almost like the concept of Chekhov's gun, where it's if you show a gun in Act 1, then the gun has to go off by Act 3. So I kind of put those in there almost as promises, not just to the readers of like, hey, eventually we're going to get into these cool topics, but also sometimes it's like for myself. It's almost like a little, like a sticky note, you know? So like, I'm going to weave this occult reference in here so that I know to go back and explain it later.
That's cool. That's cool. Do you sometimes like, you know, when you were saying that, I was almost like thinking in a way, I was like, that's kind of like almost like if I was to cover a topic for my podcast, but like, I sometimes try to cover something and like put it out so people can get an idea of what it is, what it might mean, blah, blah, blah. Try de-occulting stuff. Is that kind of like almost like what you're doing with that stuff? It's like I'm putting out occult symbolism and kind of giving you some of the basic understanding or idea that goes along with it too. Like, you know what I'm saying?
I want to spark an interest. Like, I
Gotcha,
guess,
yeah.
Within the context of a comic book, because these comic books do have like talking sheeple, and there's like drug references, and there's, you know, there's boobies and stuff. But like within all that, I kind of like to refer to it as like Manly Palmer Hall with dick jokes. So like taking yourself even less seriously. So I'm not necessarily promising to reveal all these secrets of the universe. Kind of like what Lee was saying, it might be very surface level. You could just walk away and be like, I just read 5 comic books and laughed, and that's all you got out of it. But you also might have seen that page that talks about like the MK Ultra or Monarch woodpecker grid. and like, oh, well, that probably isn't real. And maybe you just Google it and you're like, oh, wow, maybe there was something called a woodpecker grid.
Yo, I brought that up a few days ago.
Bloodlines. And yeah, that's in issue 3 of my of Time Samplers. So for example, in issue 3, it breaks down what Monarch programming is rumored to be, because Monarch wasn't ever sort of revealed the same way MK Ultra was by, you know, documentation. Monarch is almost entirely rumor, but there's a lot of consistency in the rumors. So like if you know all of the terms and you're reading issue 3 of Time Samplers, you're going to see a reference to Dr. White, who is Ewan Cameron. You'll see a reference to Dr. Black. You'll see a reference to Dr. Green, which are all like, you know, those like deep occulted names that were given to the supposed members of this. But then it shows you like the superhero programming where you create alters in a kid's head where they'll dress them up like Superman or dress them up like a knight fighting a dragon for 2 things. One, it's to put them into that like anchored state of, you know, feeling like a hero or a superhero, and then giving them their programming in these different modes, almost like going through boot camp. But then on the other end, it was like, if someone breaks away and their programming doesn't work, and they go back out into the world and they're like, hey, I was trained and they dressed me up like Superman and I fought a dragon. They're like, yeah, sure you did, buddy. You know, like move, like get off of get out of the way, right? I'm trying to get on the bus. So I think that like putting that in the comics, you might just read it and say, oh, what an interesting concept. But know that that's actually the real conspiracy theory behind Project Monarch and how it worked and all the different techniques. Like I break it down step by step on how they create like a mind-controlled slave as dictated by Fritz Springmeier in that book, you know, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. You wouldn't know that unless you've read the book, but that's kind of represents all my comics. Like if you know some OG information, you'll see it in there step by step. But if you don't know it, you know, it's occulted from you. You'd had no idea. It's well, like the.
In my opinion, this is with a lot of occultism. In fact, you could probably say all occultism. It's like a breadcrumb trail. I spent around about 4 years working with a particular occultist, and he kind of opened my eyes to quite a few things. And he basically said that if for those that are paying attention, there is no coincidences. You're meant to see certain things for a reason as part of your, you could say, a life plan. And talking about doing and working energy in retrospect or in a cyclical nature, some of the occulted symbols or occultism you may have left for yourself as a reminder, as a provocation to wake up, to pay attention, or to follow a particular path or avenue. So it could be a particular symbol, it could be a word, it could be anything that is implanted by somebody else, but it could have actually, it's connected to you and you're meant to see it. And it's meant to awaken or provoke or evoke a particular interest in a particular direction for your development.
Lee, you mentioned being part of a number of mystery schools, so you're probably familiar with like a memory palace. So sure. That's sort of how I see a lot of these comics and baking occult symbols into whether it's a Disney movie or a comic book or a corporate logo. I kind of see them as little memory palaces. And if you've got the key, or if you can recognize that that's the door to a palace and you open it up and there's all this other information in there, that's kind of what some of this is for. So as you know, as I'm reading through one of my comics, like you might just read that front page, but I've got so many symbols built in the page that if I were to be presenting it somewhere, I've got like an hour's worth of content per page because of all the little memory palace, you know, nooks and crannies in it.
Well, the particular occultism that I have studied and practiced, we basically say that we have two minds, but we're living in the wrong one. So when we do our work, we're trying to live in the correct mind, which would be, in contemporary terms, the unconscious. So I try to spend more time in my unconscious than my conscious, although it's a struggle. So things of the occult nature, or occulted symbols or sigils, that will your unconscious mind can see it very clearly. The conscious mind maybe doesn't see it, or it will see it as a mundane, whereas the unconscious will see it as profound, and it has a meaning and a purpose. So you could say that occult symbols appeals to the unconscious.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I agree with that 100%.
Oh.
For good and for bad. So it can be used to implant things. The film Inception, that he used a totem, to act as a reminder. Is he dreaming, or is it lucid dreaming, or is he in reality? So these symbols can act in the same way. Now the question is, and this is where it gets interesting. So, for instance, if we stumble across an occult symbol, who left it for us to see? Did we play a part in that in some way? Did we, in terms of some kind of spiritual or non-physical connection with a second or third party, put that occult symbol there for us to see, to wake us up? Did we leave these symbols in our life plan? Is there a mechanism to do that for the future, to give us a nudge or
the breadcrumbs, right?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting, because it opens up a lot of possibilities and potential, even just to consider the thought process that may be happening to us. So then another way of looking at it is that you could say you're living your life by remembering your future. It sounds like a contradiction.
No, I've thought shit like that before, in a sense.
It opens up a different doors of perception. Yeah, it's a different way of being.
No, I dig that. It's like a non-linear way of thinking. It's kind of like before, where we were talking about maybe an artist is painting because he's getting recognition from the future, and it's not really the future. It's more of like this adjacent, energy source that they somehow know and they can feel that they're tapping into.
Mm-hmm. So whenever I bring up this particular occulted or esoteric subject, and some people say, well, can you explain it to me? I need some confirmation of this. I normally say, well, you get days when you wake up in the morning and for no apparent reason, you've got energy and inspiration to do something, to be creative. Yeah. And it could be in many different ways. Now, where does that energy or creativity come from? Maybe it's coming from the future.
No, just kidding.
Maybe it's coming from the future.
At least the thought of the future is, to tell you the truth. I mean, you're thinking about it, probably. You're excited about thinking of what's going to happen in the future, too.
Well, this whole notion of time.
It's really interesting, though, that you're saying that.
Yeah, I mean, the whole notion of time. I mean, one thing that really kind of gave me a major shock many, many years ago, I woke up, I hit the snooze button, which was set for 5 minutes. Okay. And I'm sure many people have done this. So I hit the snooze button for 5 minutes. I went back to sleep and I had this dream, lucid dream. And the dream it seemed like it lasted for 2 hours. And then when I woke up, only 5 minutes had passed. So
that kind of dream also sounds like one that you needed to have. Like the fact that it lasted for 2 hours, perceptually, but then it only lasted for 5. It was almost like, no, you got to go back to sleep. In 5 minutes, we're going to sneak in this 2 hour experience that you're going to have for today. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see, the thing is, once you kind of open the doors to occultism and esoteric knowledge or esoteric science, you start to realize that a lot of things that we think are so-called ordinary, they're just kind of ideas of possibilities. There's way more out there for us to experience. Once you can kind of break the shackles of this kind of conditioned world of the accepted sort of ordinary version of reality.
My favorite version of one of this, and I haven't ever since I read this book from like the late 1600s. I think it's called the Voyage of Cartesius. But I've been finding ways to shoehorn it into like every single conversation. This one not excluded, but it breaks down how Rene Descartes took this to such an extreme, and I have just the profound respect for just this one aspect of it. But it's that he kind of felt that he was getting tricked or he was being misled, and there was all this false information out there, and he wanted to understand like what is truth, like what can I actually believe, and he narrowed it all the way down to like I can't even believe my own eyeballs. Like these, he had this concept of the visual section of light, and again exactly, and just being able to say like even if I can see it in front of my own eyes, that might give enough evidence to 99% of the people out there, which I'll sort of dovetail and tangent into, like, that's my biggest gripe with maybe the occult / conspiracy. And I'm kind of putting those into one basket for convenience, but that whole sort of crowd, this big amorphous crowd, it seems like so much of it relies on like what I see. You know, like, and it's almost so bad to like a digital image or a digital video of something that I see, and now I'm going to interpret that and make all these assumptions. You take yourself back to the 1600s where there wasn't even like a Photoshop, right? Someone seeing something with their own eyes, and imagine being like, no, I don't even believe that. I think someone is using like technology on me right now. They're throwing like some AI or something behind me. And I kind of like that concept. Because then you look at it, it's like the human eye perceives less than like 0.003% of all the visible light spectrum. So of course we're not seeing the whole picture. And of course that once you find yourself into that sort of system where you think that you're seeing everything and that the things in front of you are the proof and that you can make decisions based on that, just remember that you're not even talking about a fraction of 1% that you're perceiving. So what you're talking about of like, open your mind a little bit and realizing that there's more to that. I mean, it's not just like a mentality that you have to abstractly step into. It's scientific fact that we're only perceiving a fraction of a percent of what's actually around us.
Yeah, and if you look at the foundation of some of the Steiner work and some of the other Silver Age teachers, they would postulate that contemporary humans, are different to humans that lived before. Now we're living in an age of materialism, so we kind of live in a reality that is very kind of dense and concentrated. So we only believe what we can touch or sense with our five senses. Yeah, whereas that would be a consequence or side effect of being materialized. Okay, now that's not just in terms of cars, houses, and things, but it's in terms of everything. So, for instance, people 2, 3, maybe even 100 years ago had an ability to be way more spiritual, or to have acceptance of the spiritual world or the dream world or the non-physical world. And this would probably account for why there was kind of what we would consider to be kind of fairy tales or even mythology, when in actual fact people may have been able to see elementals or beings or light beings from different densities. It could have been way more normal than what it is.
I always wonder on that if maybe it was not just a matter of people like, was like Tinkerbell. If you stop believing, the Tinkerbell dies and goes away. But it might be more like they all see humanity hitting a certain threshold of being like, whoa, like I'm gonna get out of here before they start, developing some kind of high-tech prisons to like squeeze energy out of me and light their house for cheaper in the system that they're in. Almost the inverse of like the Star Trek Galactic Federation, right? Where they see that once you've hit a certain level of technology, it's like, okay, you can join the club and fly around in space with the rest of us socialists. But until you get there, like you just have to be like a bumpkin on whatever planet you're in. And I feel like maybe we went the opposite direction. Instead of joining the Federation, we went another angle, and it's like all of the helpers and all of the other like non-human entities, they kind of like withdrew, like the little sea slugs like snipping back out.
Yeah. I've recently been doing a bit of a deep dive into the technology of mirrors, and one of my kind of the directions of my research is looking back in terms of historically, we never used to have mirrors. So people's first-hand experience of themselves didn't really exist. So the sense of self would have been completely different. Now, if you eradicate the sense of self, that means potentially that humanity or communities, even families, would have a greater sense of being one face, because you wouldn't really know what you look like unless you was able to see a clear reflection in a pond or a lake, as an example. Other than that, you wouldn't know what you look like. Whereas now, and I think this is part of the materialistic process, quite the opposite. We never stop seeing ourselves, whether it's in a mirror, on Facebook, on photographs, reflections of windows. So that, I think just that in itself could affect the psyche of humanity.
Well, I mean, I always like bringing it back to, like, I love woo woo, but I also like stepping back from woo woo just to get, you know, like the spectrum, to get the sort of goalpost defined a little bit. And I would almost say that, yeah. I mean, and I don't prescribe to one particular. I'm more of a devil's advocate for every single argument that I find myself in. But I almost say what you're describing is almost like collapsing functions around, where if I'm constantly observing myself and everything around me and giving credit to the things that I'm seeing, that I might be actively, you know, say collapsing those functions and making them that way for me, and they can't kind of like revert back. So in that way, it very is like manifesting in some reality, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's even quantum physics. So the observer effect. Now, some people go with it, some people don't. I've got this thing that I call the car key effect, as in car keys. So as an example, we've all experienced where we go into the kitchen or the lounge, we put our keys on the table, and then we 5 minutes later, we go to get them, they're not there. And it's like, oh, where are they? Where are they? You start looking everywhere for them, and then they're back on the table. Or there's some kind of time loss or memory lapse or something like that. Now, if you do the same situation or scenario, but there's 10 people in the room and they all see you put the keys on the table, there's a higher probability that the keys will still be there. Now, I'm using keys as an example, but it could be something a lot smaller. It could be something where we're more absent-minded. But there's definitely something about the more times or the multiplication of the observer on some kind of phenomena or action, that it cements it or crystallizes it or concentrates it into a reality. I think as an example, the media or the propaganda, that's exactly what they're doing. So the more people they can get to be eyes on something and or use their psyche or attention for something, then it kind of cements it up into a new normal.
Yeah, you just took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, I think a lot of social media and propaganda, and even like, I hate to say it, even the conspiracy community, I think gets infiltrated with memes and videos that are just cementing things into reality, really. It could like this. I've even said it before, and I'm not saying a lot of it is, but like, how do you know you're not getting people who are just acting like they're one of these mentally ill leftists just to put it out there to trigger people, and then somebody watches that and thinks that person's actually real, when they could have just thrown makeup on and a silly wig and acted silly in front of the camera, but they're really not that person. You know what I'm saying? They could just be like fucking off.
I think,
and then you think that that's all over the world right now because I just saw that one person who was pretending.
I think that's the majority, to be honest.
Well, you know this latest with the Dalai Lama and the young boy.
I just saw that today. What?
So that's a good example. So, for instance, why would he do that? I mean, there's many reasons why he would do that. But as an example, why has it been put out into the mainstream media, and it's going to be, you know, it's seriously trending, especially in the truther community.
Oh yeah, I've seen it all over Instagram.
I think someone might have been like, "Hey, dude, I think it's time to, like, you know, give up the chair to someone else," and he just wasn't having it. So, I think there was like, you know what? The next time he does something crazy, because he does something crazy constantly, let's go ahead and just like let this one get out. You know what I mean? Like they stopped being his handlers for just a split second, and he's like, "Hey, dude, suck my tongue," you know. And that's kind of what happens when you know that goes to your head. So I feel like it was someone was just saying like, "Hey, let's let this guy go off without the training wheels for an afternoon and see what happens," and then bam.
Oh, it's like Joe Biden.
Yeah, dude, it's exactly like Joe Biden.
Yeah. I kind of figured it could be some kind of humiliation ritual as
I've thought that point. Too, yeah.
So, I mean, same difference in a way, I guess.
The one thing I do, and I'm not downplaying what was done at all, but it's just the funny thing is, like, me, when I first saw it, I was like, all right, I saw it on Instagram, so I was like, I have to.
I thought it was AI.
I was like,
someone butchered it. There's no way.
I was like, I have to watch this somewhere else besides here to even, confirm it. So I found the video on YouTube. Now, again, I'm not discrediting what he did, but I find the funny thing, though, about the whole thing that we're seeing going on is that if you were to go watch the whole clip, again, I'm not downplaying it, but he does at one point actually smack the kid, joking around and being like, "You're crazy." Why is that left out, though? You don't see that at all on the one going on. Again, I'm not like saying it wasn't screwed up, but if you saw him do that, there'd be a little bit inside the person thinking, okay, maybe it wasn't as bad.
Maybe, unless
you know what
saw
I'm
the
saying?
camera out of the
No,
side of his
you know what
eye
I'm
and was
saying?
like,
But we'll leave that out to share it, so you automatically think that. You know what I'm getting at? Like, not that I'm downplaying it, because I'm sure it was some weird creep shit. But what I'm getting at is, like, I just find it funny how that part, right after the weird shit, totally snipped out on everything that's going through the internet. Why didn't you just show the whole thing?
It's a fair point, although it's very hard to do character assassination.
That's what I'm getting at.
It's easy to do character assassination if you're going around asking little kids to suck your tongue.
No, I just, like, again, I found it funny how, like, that part was clipped out. You know, like,
And this is the CIA-backed Dalai Lama too, right? So I mean,
but I think as well, I think what they're doing, I think there's an agenda for this, and this includes Joe Biden. Going back to what we're saying about getting forgiveness from a priest. So I think what possibly we might witness is the Dalai Lama seeking some kind of forgiveness, which is already put out an apology, and it may be he'll come back as some kind of hero, or is able to come back. Now, if you look at Joe Biden, I mean, all I know of him is that he likes sniffing young people. Yeah. I don't
who doesn't like the smell of vanilla and blueberries? Come on, man.
He likes sniffing kids and sending our money over to Ukraine. That's
and he got publicly warned about it, yeah. And he took that warning and he said he wouldn't do it and whatever. He would adjust his behavior, and then he gets to become the most powerful man in the world. So even something like that, I think it's a way of breaking down the boundaries, because I think we're definitely going through a process at the moment where the boundaries are being broken down gradually, yeah, so that morality basically goes out the window. Anything goes.
I mean, look
and
at
I think
it.
this is all part of materialism.
I mean,
well, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
Real quick. I mean, just even look at like what's going on now. You have a president whose son screws hookers and smokes crack, and we have an ex-president who's trying to run again who screws porn stars. And the funny thing is
that's another good example with the former president. So he's now going to be able to come back and maybe be a hero. He may be the president again. And then
if he does,
that's another way of breaking the boundaries.
If he does, basically what we got was 12 years of stalemate and nothing done with this country. The first 4 years of him was defending himself. The next 4 years is to make sure he can't run again. And if he wins, it'll be just another 4 years of him defending himself. And nothing got fucking done for this country in 12 years.
Which might be a good thing sometimes. I don't know.
Well, look how good it's going now.
That no progress might be better than some progress, because the what progress is defined as sometimes is a little bit scary. But
maybe our progress now needs to get pumped. Yeah, I mean, maybe where we're going, it's a good thing to slow down, I guess. But
to both of your points, I think that we've just been involved in a very long cycle of humiliation ritual. So like Trump's first term, humiliation ritual of the U.S. on the world stage. Now we're going through a humiliation ritual. We're very, very much like Biden's going to sniff your wife and your daughter and your granddaughter's hair right in front of you. And he might even tweak a nipple here and there.
Hide your kids, hide your wife.
Power play. He's humiliating you on C-SPAN in front of, thousands of people, knowing that he's got the power to do this. And like, I'm going to sniff this kid's hair. I don't even care if it's inappropriate or nothing. And I feel like that's part of the humiliation ritual where people are like, dude, can you believe the balls on this dude? He just sniffed he just sniffed everyone in that kid's family. Like, the balls on this dude. Of course he's going to be president. Like, only a president could walk into a room and just sniff everybody's hair and then walk out like it was a normal thing to do. It's like, it puts him on that level to where maybe he doesn't even realize he's doing it. And people standing back are like, dude, this guy is just like exuding like alpha energy, and he doesn't even realize it because he's got dementia. So it's almost like this ball of chaos, and all the chaos magicians are like, ooh, like, how can I use this catalyst for my little good?
Well, we're going through the same thing in the UK. If we look at all of the political class, there's so much scandal. I mean, it's just one thing after another, and they just keep getting away with it.
I would love to know your guys' opinions on like the Paris riots. Are they as big of a deal? Is is that also got some kind of connotations that we're talking about with like energy transfer in it? Or do you think part of that is a show? Like, is the media puffing that up to make it seem like those Parisians are really pushing back and causing changes as like a tail wagging the dog kind of thing?
Well, in the UK, we're getting zero coverage in the media. You'll only find it on the alternative media. So that would kind of, on the surface level, tell you that it's real. My personal take on it is it's allowed to happen. There's probably agent provocateurs involved because I don't know. I kind of figure that there has to, this realm, or the people that control this realm or try to control this realm, they have to kind of allow certain things to take place to give the illusion of freedom or some kind of pushback.
Well, you know, I was going to say real fast, just to add to this, Lee, even if you follow social media, if the right sees a country protesting, it's like automatically somehow that's going to turn into the United States and everybody's going to be free. Oh, look at France. We're not, hold the line, Patriots. It's like, what the fuck?
Well, I think historically, France is a bit of the fall guy. I think they're allowed to have these revolutions and stuff to offer the world a kind of hope that something might change.
But when it struggle comes to session.
yeah, and I do think this does play out because they have to create this kind of illusion that there is the potential of freedom.
That's what I was getting at.
If you guys have ever heard of Gustave Le Bon, he wrote a book called The Crowd in the late 1800s, and it's been cited as like the thing that dictators tend to read and then get all of their dictator ideas from. So I think like the Nazis read it and Stalin read it, and it's kind of served as like a basis for a lot of different people. But he makes a really good point in that book. It kind of says exactly what you just mentioned, Lee, where there's this realization, and it's a super racist book. If you were to read it, like the guy would be canceled if he was writing it today, obviously. But he writes about the different areas and countries and cultures within those countries in such a matter-of-fact way. And he mentions that, the French, like it's in their blood to revolt. So if you want to control the French, you have to let them revolt. But if you can like basically put them in a little playpen and, all right, go have your tantrum, guys. There's the ball pit and like, don't tuck yourselves out. It's almost like if you just allow them to do that and play out their like rebellious attitude, that now you've got control over it and you can, use that and harness it so that you can almost like instill other arguments within them already protesting that are maybe aligned with things that you want to have enacted, so that you can kind of like infiltrate there, take that energy that they're like, they're all yelling at, the blue building. And then you're like, man, that red building sucks too. And all of a sudden they start arguing at that one. And it took almost no effort. It just took you like flipping the switch on, like a lever to redirect the train almost. He writes this out in The Crowd as like a formula, and he goes into like every other country too. He's like, oh, if you want to take over Italy, you got to get the Argentinians, you got to get the like, I'm paraphrasing that, but he breaks it down to like in such a way that's, I don't know, I find that fascinating about, let them have it, let them have this little controlled struggle session, like let them work it out of their system. They'll be passed out later tonight anyways.
Mm-hmm. Well, over the last couple of years, I've taken a little bit of stick on some of the things I say, because I kind of see things a little bit differently to, I guess, the majority of those, even conspiracy theorists. So as an example, we talk about the New World Order and that there's some kind of reset coming or some kind of digital revolution. Well, if there is a New World Order coming and there's a reset coming, then that means that there has to be some changes. So the change is either going to have to come from them enforcing a change, or it can come from the people demanding a change. So a lot of the stuff that's taken place, in my opinion, over the last few years, is kind of setting up the public consciousness to want rid of this current system. So at some point, it's going to be the people that are going to cry out for a new world order. Whether it's finance, corruption, police, political
really
class.
Well, they're crying out for it now, actually. I mean,
Yeah, it's not even going to be like a grassroots version of it. It's going to be like, we need more laws to keep us in order.
Yeah. So, for
No,
instance,
we need Elon Musk to come save us.
like in the UK, the political system is in complete disarray. The general public, if they was to do an election, I think people wouldn't bother going. And I think we're almost at that point where if somebody somewhere, and it will probably be AI that will have to do it in the end, puts it out and says, look, do you want rid of government? There's a high possibility that the general public that used to be conservative or Labour or Liberal would actually say, yeah, let's get rid of government. Let's be controlled by AI, as an example. But I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we're being primed, and I think at the same time they're kind of testing the water a little bit, and I think they're nudging this theory that I've got. I think they're nudging it to a point where they think, yeah, should we pull the trigger? Yeah, let's go.
Well, this is my experience in boot camp all over again, right? Like this is like the WEF and all of the different sort of global dynamics happening. Those are the 3 drill sergeants that are screaming at that kid that's like crumbling, right? Because once you shout enough things and once you traumatize, we're talking about trauma-based programming. Once I instill enough trauma in you, you'll just reach out to the first hand that presents itself as like a stable, way to get out of there. So yeah, I think it's going to be like, oh man, trains keep blowing up and, food supplies keep falling and there's all these pandemics that keep going. And like, once that you just are at wit's end, money's lost all of its value and like you can't move anywhere. Then all of a sudden it's like, and then here's this new world order. Although I think that you're both onto something where they'll put us into a state where we're begging for it. They're not going to offer it. It'll be like, please, please, please give it to us. So then they can be like, oh, all right, if you really want it, you know what I mean?
If I have
to have this whole, here's these laws that we've been working on,
Oh, we just happen to have millions of ampules waiting for this fucking vaccination sitting around.
Well, I think the main difference, I think historically, you're able to control people with kind of boots on the ground, guns to the head, and all of those things. But because we're moving into a digital kind of dictatorship, for want of a better word, or digital communism, if they were to say maybe 10 years ago, say, look, this phone is going to control your life, most people would say, nah, it's okay. But I think they want to get us to a point where we're so disillusioned with the mistakes and the errors and the fragility of human decision making that we lose all trust in humans or humanity, that humanity will quite happily say, yeah, AI, please, you be the boss.
I'm pretty hardline on this particular, and it might seem completely frivolous, but I do think somewhere deep down, this is important to me. It irritates me to no end when someone's like, I asked AI to do this, or I asked AI what this would be like. And to me, man, I think that all of humanity needs to get into conditioning themselves to be telling what AI, like never consider yourself asking AI a question. It's always like, I'm telling AI what to do. It's a tool. My best analogy, which is still a little bit contrived, but it's like you don't pick up a hammer and ask the hammer, hey, do you think that how should I hit this nail in front of me? What angle should I hit it at? Is it in the right position? You just grab the hammer and you hit the nail. Yeah. And I think that people need to look at AI the exact same way, where you say like, here's what you're here for, or here's your input, here's what the output is that I want, make that output. But we're already into, I mean, if you just look at like the most popular AI posts, it's almost always someone asking a question. They're saying, please, they're saying, thank you. Yeah. They're almost having to like, give it the upper hand, almost like there's already an imbalanced power dynamic, even though at this point, AI is the equivalent of, like a newborn baby, at least in terms of where we're at. But we're already asking these babies for permission and asking these babies like for information they couldn't possibly have, and then giving them credit just because we're surprised that the baby can talk already.
Yeah, you make a very good point. And if you look back historically in terms of the Industrial Revolution, so you could say that was the emancipation from physical slavery. Yeah, so machines could do a lot of the hard tasks. We're now going into, you could say, the digital revolution, which is going to be the emancipation of mental slavery, okay? Which kind of sounds okay. So we're going to be free from, but what it truly means is It means you become mentally dependent on the digital world. So rather than telling AI what to do, exactly what you said, we're asking what to do from AI. And Nick, you made a very good point a few weeks back about is this kind of AI type stuff, is it a type of a Ouija board? And I was going to mention this earlier when you were talking, Thomas, but I didn't want to interrupt. If you look back, even within the last 100 years, the use of a Ouija boards or table talking, seances and stuff like that, it was really prevalent. It was really popular, even in the Christian world. So they would do table talking seances on the Saturday and then go to church on the Sunday. It was very normal to communicate with spirits and entities and God knows what else. And I think in some ways that would have been some kind of dependency on somebody else or something else telling you, giving you directions or directives. So all I see from AI and the way people are using AI or hoping to use AI will be a way of getting directives or things to do.
That terrifies me, but I mean, we don't even have to predict it because that's what's happening right now. It seems like most of the big AI sort of like the things that make it out into the media and get shared around, it's AI telling people what to do, or it's terrifying to me, man.
Yeah. It's actually, I didn't even look at it like that when I even made that comparison. Like, you're really actually still being dependent on something just to tell you something. You know, I didn't even like look at it like that basic, but that's actually like pretty. It's serious. That's real though. You're looking for an extension of something to tell you something, and like for what, to feel good? Like,
you're not even joking, man, because people download apps that were like you tell it every once in a while, like what I'm feeling, or, you know, like it'll check your blood pressure. It'll check like the elasticity and things like this. And then it basically tells you what mood you're in. You know what I mean? It's almost like the inverse of a mood ring where you look at the screen and the screen shows you red and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to be mad right now because you told me based on these metrics that I gave you that I'm mad. And I feel like people are going to do that. You know, it's going to be like, what mood am I in, AI? Oh, great. I'm sad. What song do I want to hear to make me happy? Oh, it just happens to be this song that just came out that's trending. What a great coincidence. And I think that a lot of that's going to happen so naturally to where, like you guys are kind of saying, that people give all the credit to AI as if AI knows all these answers, but really it's just going to be perpetuating whatever that information is like on deck, right? It's kind of like how ChatGPT works now. It just gives you the most convenient thing it can, going back to that same principle of energy.
Yeah, I think you got to factor in the corporations. So as an example, if you were to ask AI, how should I feel, or what should I do about how I feel? It will steer you in the direction of a corporation that's going to.
How close are you to a McDonald's right now? We'll tell you how you feel. You're hungry.
I mean, if you think about it, sort of contemporary life is already like that. They're just taking it to the next level. So I think they're going more to the source or the cause rather than the effect. I think at the moment there's a kind of a lot of nudging between the cause and effect. I think with this advanced digital technology, they want to go direct to the cause, so they can basically tell you how you feel and tell you what you need to support that feeling, and it'll all be steered around some kind of corporate exchange.
I feel like we can be talking about the same premise and the same set of laws and all these different topics, because like I was talking about before with the silent weapons for quiet wars and how police have discretion on how they can enforce laws and kind of move things around. That's the same kind of ways that like AI can maybe influence you to do some things or not. Even when I worked at Disney, one of the this doesn't sound as impressive unless you like actually see it for yourself, but basically they've got like this whole control room where you can see how many people are in line for like the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. And then there's might be like an empty restaurant right by it. And you can actually see in real time as they've got these metrics. It's like, oh, that guy that just got in line, there's probably like 80 minutes until he actually gets beyond this point where he won't come back out of the ride. So they'll just start having the restaurants throw on, you know, some like nice aromatic sort of foods. Even if no one's there to buy it, they'll just start cooking fajitas, and they'll like start pumping, you know, certain types of music in different places. And you can just see the people breaking off from the line. Like first they get, it gets their attention, you know, they start smelling it, and it's like, oh, maybe I'm hungry. You know, I'm smelling these fajitas all of a sudden. Maybe I'm hungry now. And you can see people peeling off the line, and the number starts ticking down. Okay, now the average wait time for this line just went down, and the estimated profit for this restaurant that was nearby is starting to go up. And it's just like, again, like almost like someone controlling like like plumbing, right? You're just turning off this valve to redirect the water to go over here, and then once the water fills up over here, they just turn the valve back again. Apply that in every one of these situations that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's algorithms, you could say. It's and I think like I've already said, we've already got it to a degree. I just think that they're going to take it to the next level. Now we can talk about the positive, or how technology can get you to do something. Now let's look at the other side of it, the negative. So when we look at censorship, I believe that if they are able to continue on the trajectory that they're on, they will be able to cancel or censor thoughts. So you won't even have those thoughts. I think not for all of us, but some of humanity, if they succumb to this kind of mind wiping or brainwashing or conditioning, operant conditioning, that they won't even have certain thoughts. It wouldn't even cross their mind to say no to a government dictate or some message that comes through on their smartphone. And I think that'll be the next kind of level or the next stage of this process.
I have thought about that. That if like just something that we're being given or even taking in not naturally, but like through food, even, you know, whatever, somehow might be actually given something, or something will be introduced into our body that will actually even just somehow make us be like, okay. I mean, like you can see.
I think it'll be done.
Don't insects do that to like animals? Isn't there insects that actually can like start controlling other things' brains?
There's a fungus that attacks ants and other insects, and it invades the brain, and it can actually control the body through the brain.
Well, I think they could do it through higher level methods of mesmerism, or even basic hypnosis in some ways. But I think possibly, I mean, I can't prove this, and I haven't really got any particular evidence, but this is just kind of a thought process or speculation, that maybe through some kind of electrical magnetic frequency or some kind of electronic device, they may be able to censor some kind of thought patterns or ideas, or limit the capacity to think. And I think they do already do this to a degree, not internally but externally. So as an example, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. If you go into a big supermarket and you've got a list in your head of things to get, if you don't pay attention, you can't remember anything. You kind of you forget why you're even in there.
Sometimes I'm better off not going in with a list, actually. I'll get out faster and with more shit. I go in with a list, I get all fucked up.
Yeah, because there's all kinds of, even just basic NLP, using colors, using things that attract you, things that are more appealing, the lighting, music. There's so many different things that could affect.
Crazy people in the store.
Anchoring. Yeah, crazy people in the store.
I mean, let's face it, if marketing didn't work, the companies wouldn't spend billions of pounds on marketing. And I think when people say, well, what is the occult? I say, well, if you want to look at a basic level of occultism, it's marketing.
Well, and I would make an argument that marketing is just a modern day equivalent of rhetoric and logic, which are no longer taught. So like if you had the 7 classic liberal arts, right? You had the trivium and quadrivium.
Yeah.
Well, now all we have is grammar. We barely get grammar, but grammar is what's taught. So you know what words are enough that they can have an impact on you. But you don't necessarily learn about logic unless you go into some kind of academic field, and then you learn about all sorts of logical fallacies and things. But even then, you're probably not going to learn rhetoric unless you go into what, marketing or politics. Those are like the two avenues that you can actually be taught rhetoric, and maybe philosophy, but you know, it's sort of in like a different category. But I think that this modern day marketing and, you know, just sales techniques, all it is that occulted practice of rhetoric that people used to just inherently know, or at least you would aim to know more about it, and now it doesn't even seem like it's a real thing. It's just all marketing and gobbledygook. But that's only because the only industries that are actively using and sharing rhetoric and like rhetorical devices and rhetorical training, it all tends to be either like self-help / marketing / MLM, which is kind of the same. Like, you know, self-help turns into MLM at a certain point. They almost all do. But I feel like it's I don't know if this means that like marketers went out and they occulted rhetoric, or if people just dumbed down to the point where they stopped caring about rhetoric, and now it can be used as like this magic, right? It's an advanced technology that you don't understand, so it feels like magic. Someone just got me to buy this thing that I didn't need. I just bought a timeshare. You know, how they do that? They must have like hypnotized me or put something in the water. No, they probably just understood about 6 months worth of rhetoric, and you understood 0 months worth, and that's kind of how it happened. But this is leading to an open question for you guys, but I feel like the occultism aspect, so often occultism sounds like it's someone hiding something from you, but really it's just like everyone forgot or everyone stopped caring. Like if everyone just pays attention to ChatGPT and no one actually learns how to do anything anymore, like was that information occulted from you, or did we occult it from ourselves?
Well, one of my teachers, or teachers of my teachers, Mr. Gurdjieff, he said a very interesting thing. He said, some come to this world to hide the bone. He says, I came here to hide the dog. So you could say you can either hide the bone or hide the dog, or hide both of them. You
have to explain that to me, man.
Well, you know the expression to bury a dog's bone. Yeah.
I get that. Yeah. But
yeah,
you have to explain burying the dog to me.
So for instance, you can either hide the bone from the dog, or you hide the dog from the bone. There's two ways. There's two ends to it. So there's two ends to occulting things. So you either hide knowledge, or you make it, or people hide it from themselves. They don't want it, or they don't want to look for it.
Okay, I got it. I got you.
So basically, it's two ends of the same stick, you could say.
And you could be stuck in both of them, technically, in a sense, too.
Yeah, you could bury the dog and the bone.
Yeah, you really, yeah.
Cover all your bases.
Yeah, that's good.
So, but I think going back to what you're saying, I think it's two ends. So I think it's a bit of both. I think there is some hidden knowledge, and I think there is people that are not interested in the knowledge. I think it does work both ends.
This one sounds farcical, but this is an honest question. Do you think that there really is, say, like the forgotten name of God, or that's a placeholder for a million different concepts, but essentially that humans had some sort of ultimate knowledge, let's call it like Atlantis or you know, some sixth sense, and I'm gonna again use a placeholder of like the lost name of God, but do you think that there's some information out there that you could just learn it and immediately become, you know, advanced just from learning it? Or do you think that's more of a metaphor of like the process of self-discovery, and that the adventure is, you know, more than the destination kind of thing?
Well, I mean, as an example, if we take the five senses, so we're told we've got five senses, but if you go on Wikipedia now, it says we've got 7. So we kind of dumb down because we're told to be dumb.
So do you think? Well, what are the 7 senses? Because I don't.
Well, so for instance, you've got your 5 senses, and then you've got proprioception, which is a sense, and then you've got your spatial prediction, which is another sense. So for instance, you know if you're hanging upside down because you have like a sense of direction. But they always talk about the 5 senses. Now, I think the 5 senses were kind of manipulated to suit the material world. And if you look historically, even in the esoteric schools, and this is why the esoteric schools sprung up in the Silver Age, was because around about 1875, when scientism pulled the trigger and made a move to eradicate any kind of intangible spiritual science or knowledge of the invisible realms, you could say, or the quality of life rather than the quantity of life, which could be measured according to science. They had to kind of dumb down humans to suit the material world, because those other senses that we may have, maybe not everybody has them, or the potential to have those senses would give you direct access to even God, maybe, or the sense of God. Because let's face it, we are living in some kind of nihilistic, anti-God era.
There's something interesting. I can't remember the source on this, but I guess the source isn't as interesting as the premise. But it was that before the discovery of fire, and I guess that would be one version of technology, or some like the lost name of God could perhaps be like humans understanding how to create fire. If you were to lose that somehow, it could possibly take a long time to kind of regain that knowledge again. But that's just one of many different examples of things that can just like kind of come and go so easily that it seems like second nature. It almost seems inherent, like, oh, everyone knows you just rub flint together, you cause some kind of friction and feed it, and fire comes from that. But it's not like we came right out of the gate and knew how to make the fire. And this theory that I heard that's so interesting is that before we knew how to create fire, and it was more of a rarity, that all of our senses might have been a little bit more centrally located, like maybe closer to like the pineal gland, for example, and that over time our sense of touch expanded across our skin. But before that, you might not have actually had the same ability, and that maybe over time our sense of sight could also spread across the entire body. So you're not just seeing out of two localized organs, but maybe like your skin is just one big organ that covers your body. Maybe sight might go that way. Maybe olfactory senses, maybe taste might actually be like a full body experience at some time. But on that trajectory, you're going from a centralized place where everything's at to spreading it more out. And with that progression, or maybe degression, that's bringing you closer to the material world, because now you're adapting your body to be more in a line with the things that are around you in localized space, and not necessarily in the centralized. So that might be this anti-evolution where our bodies are becoming more adapt to the material realm, but we're also devolving from where we probably should have been.
Yeah, well, the teachers of the Silver Age, they actually said externally we're evolving, but internally we're going in some kind of regress. And with regards to the development of the senses, so one of the exercises in esoteric studies will be in order to grow or to enhance one of the other senses, like the sixth and seventh sense, the technique is that you take away one of the five. Yeah. So, for instance, if you try and do things when you close your eyes, or you put a blindfold on, you'll start to have to use other senses. And when you take away one, you start to compound the others. And by compounding them, you actually give birth to another sense.
This is like every good Kung Fu movie, and also the premise to the Daredevil comic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's just pretty wild. I never thought of that thing that you said before with the spreading of the nerves. I was like, what the fuck? That's pretty wild way to think about it, though.
Well, and evolutionarily, it's because now that you can create fire, that fire might be a new source. Like, people might have just been burning themselves alive constantly. So it's like it was like an actual necessity in order for people to stop dying in dumb ways, that all of a sudden you need to be able to like feel that heat in front of you before you just walk right into it. And that's again, that's a gross oversimplification of like the much detailed theory, but that eventually it was all centralized in our brain, and then it had to start spreading out the same way that our spinal cord is essentially just like a really long chain of neurons that came from the brain. So it's almost like the brain might have started and then built this body around it as it went forward.
I've thought that myself as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are stories of these kind of beings that are just basically heads with a spine. almost like snakes with a human head on.
Or Krang from Ninja Turtles.
Well, I mean, I guess in a sense we do. Part of us do start off that way. Before, we start off as a head and a tail, fucking swim into the egg.
Yeah. Well, going back to like occulted knowledge, kind of, is it being occulted or not? Well, let's go back to direct realism. So if we take the growing of a tomato. So I'm of a certain age that when I grew up, we used to eat around about 80%, maybe 90% of our own product from the garden. Kids of today, unless they're from a farm or a rural location, if you said to them, how do you grow a tomato? They would probably say, I have no idea. And even if you gave them the what they need to grow a tomato, they wouldn't know how to do it. So you could
plus,
say,
we're talking like months in the future. Like, I want a tomato right now, man. I don't want to plant something and eat it in 2 months from now.
so you could say the knowledge of growing a tomato has been occulted, or it's been lost. Like I say, in my parents' and my grandparents' generation, they wouldn't dream of buying a tomato, even from a grocery store.
I mean, to throw a little bit of fuel on that one too, but now not only do maybe people not know as much about growing their own, but now you've got like Monsanto creating Terminator seeds that intentionally make sure that it can't continue growing, and you don't have anything as like a heirloom sort of tomato anymore. You've just got like the one use tomato, right? It's like you plant it, it grows a new tomato, you either eat it or it don't, and that was your one shot. So in that case, there's like an active occulting of nature from people. But I don't know if that one is, so like when we're talking about occult knowledge, it's a little bit more abstract, because it's like, you can't read this book, or you can read the book, but you're not going to know what any of the words mean because you don't have this other book. You know what I mean? It's like books all the way down until you have to read a whole bunch of like sacred tomes. But when we're talking about like physical reality and taking like those seeds so that you can't even plant them if you wanted to, I feel like it's both different types of occultism, but one of those is very direct and intentional, and you, even if you didn't want it to happen to you, it might still happen to you. Whereas this other version of occultism of knowledge, it's a little bit self-inflicted in some ways.
Yeah, and as well, like for instance, if you join a mystery school or esoteric group or whatever you want to call it, they will say like there's a reason why it's occulted. It's occulted for humanity's own protection, because it could go the wrong way. Because ultimately,
I never liked that excuse though, man. It always sounds like, like, oh, I can't teach you how to shoot fire out of your hands because you might burn the house down. And that's always what it kind of sounds like. And I guess that's sort of that question. I was like, is there this lost name of God that if someone told me all of a sudden, like, I can start a fire, I can like shoot lightning out of my eyes, and that's why they can't tell me.
Yeah, ultimately, you could say occult knowledge is about manifesting in some ways, or altering reality, or being able to change the trajectory. Now, I mean, I know plenty of people, I wouldn't trust them with the ability, and even myself sometimes. So, for instance, if every thought I had materialized straight away, can you imagine the state of this realm, of this world?
Well, this world would be fucked up. For me.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, and I'm not justifying anything, because we need more good to come from the occult. The problem is those that have the knowledge sometimes, or a lot of the time, use it for wrong purposes, for the suppression, for the devolution, or for greed and the 7 deadly sins. So I think there is an element of that. Can people be trusted? So, for instance, Rudolf Steiner, he said we're at an age now, we're at such a desperate, critical age for humanity that everything must be de-occulted. So he went out and did lectures and basically exposed everything that the secret societies were doing and how they were doing it, and all the rituals and all of the magic that goes along with it. And that's probably why Steiner didn't live too long. And then you had somebody like Gurdjieff who said, well, we shouldn't hide the knowledge and keep it like in these secret brotherhoods, but we should kind of have some balance. We can't just let everything out. And I think as well, even if you did let everything out, and I think they're kind of doing it now, I don't think there's that much that is occulted anymore. I think you can pretty much find out a lot of things quite easily, even if you go on Google. or YouTube or whatever. You can find out a lot of stuff.
I think a lot of it has to do with they're not wanting to believe it too, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, just because you give everybody the cultured knowledge, it doesn't guarantee they can use it or they'd want to use it. I think we're a long way away from that as part of this devolution or humanity kind of going backwards internally.
I could definitely say you wouldn't want BLM or Antifa knowing how to use magic right now. I mean, somebody in those organizations, I think, understands magic, but not all of them. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
I think a lot of them fall for this one still, though.
Yeah. Oh, I just pulled this rabbit out of my head.
But even in the esoteric groups, they don't know a lot of the stuff.
Oh, not at all.
And I think it's done that way as well. Like, I think they've been dumbed down. I mean,
my experience,
sure
I can say that's true.
Yeah.
My experience. I hate to say it.
Yeah. I mean, I've experienced the company of, unless they're playing dumb or something, or playing the fool, which is a possibility, they pretty much don't know anything more than the next person.
Yeah, pretty much. Gentlemen, I hate to do this to you, but we're actually almost about at the 2-hour mark, but I do have to get going now anyway. So
Sure.
Yeah, we got to continue this, man.
Yeah, no, for sure.
For another two.
Yeah, there was actually, I had 2 more questions I wanted to ask you, but now it's too late. So maybe I'll get you back on and I did want to get into more of your art stuff too and give you a chance to promote some more of that. So maybe we can have you back on, shit talk some other, or theorize on some more topics.
Yeah, please, I'll sneak this in while we're still here.
There we go.
ParanoidAmerican.com for all your comic and conspiracy needs.
I love how it even says MK Ultra on like little print on the back too.
I don't know if you can even, I don't know if I can hold it close
Yeah, it's
enough.
upside down now, but yeah,
Here.
I saw it. That's awesome.
Oh, you can't see, but it says Epstein killed himself in fine print down here too.
That's great. Thomas, why don't you let everybody know where they can find your stuff again?
Yeah, ParanoidAmerican.com is where all my comics are at. And if you want me on social media, Paranoid American on Instagram is probably the best place to find me. OccultBookClub.com for that podcast, Realities Ours with Nate. And I'm missing a few others, but yeah, man, you can just go to ParanoidAmerican.com. All my links are there.
Awesome. Yeah, actually, like I said before, I think 4 more days you'll be on the show anyway. So with Realities
to be
Ours.
continued.
Yes. And Lee, would you like to let everybody know where they can find your stuff again as well?
Sure. Yeah, innerguardians.com or Inner Guardians on YouTube. They're the 2 main avenues to get to me.
Awesome. So if you guys don't know who these people are yet, go hit those links and go check them out. Lee, thank you so much for coming on, especially kind of on a short notice. I always appreciate your take and just your knowledge and your experience with this stuff. That's what's up.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Thomas, thank you again for finally coming on. I know I said to you before, I think I asked you to come on like 6 months ago. And then I finally hit you up. I was like, oh, you're going to finally come on. It was my fault, but thank you that we finally made it happen. And you actually are somebody that I started getting a lot of requests for, so finally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, finally. Well, that's what reminded me, actually. I was like, fuck, well, he's in a chat with me already to do a roundtable, and I was like, sure, why not just ask him now?
Hit me up, man. Honestly, we could have went on to so many different topics here. So
yeah, no, we'll definitely make it happen again. So thank you all very much for the both of you for coming on. Everybody, thank you very much for jumping in the chat. There was a fuck ton. At one point, we were holding 33 for a few minutes. That's what's up.
Illuminati confirmed.
Yes. Yeah. We can't get away from it, can we? No matter how hard we try. So
all you gotta do is switch from base 10 to base 12, and you're out of it, though.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but you all know who you are. Thank you very much for jumping in. A bunch of stuff going in the convo. That is what's up. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.